I never thought I'd become the kind of woman who keeps receipts. Not literally, though God knows I have those too, filed away in a manila folder I labeled Grace's education. But emotionally. The kind of woman who remembers every slight, every dismissive comment, every time someone made her feel small. But after what happened at that dinner table 3 months ago, I understood why some women turn into record keepers. Sometimes, you need proof that you weren't imagining it. That the disrespect was real. That you had every right to do what you did. My name is Eleanor Walsh, and I'm 62 years old. I raised 3 children in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens while working double shifts at Presbyterian Hospital. My husband died when our youngest was 7. A heart attack at 43, sudden as a summer storm, and I became both mother and father overnight. I learned to fix leaky faucets and help with algebra homework and pack lunches that looked like love even when the bank account was screaming. My son Michael, my middle child, grew up to be everything I'd hoped. Kind. Hard-working. A good man. Which is why it broke something in me when he married Grace. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world right now, leave a comment and tell me where you are. Because I want to know I'm not alone in this. I want to know other people understand what it feels like when someone walks into your family and treats you like you're nothing. Grace came into our lives 4 years ago, and from the beginning I tried. Lord knows I tried. I welcomed her with open arms, threw her a bridal shower even though money was tight, helped them move into their first apartment. I bit my tongue when she redecorated the guest room I'd stayed in during visits and got rid of the quilt my mother had made. I smiled through comments about my cooking, my clothes, my old-fashioned way of doing things. Michael loved her, and that was supposed to be enough. But 3 months ago, everything changed. We were having dinner at their place, a beautiful colonial in Westchester that I'd helped with the down payment on, though Grace never acknowledged that, and she'd made pot roast. It was good, better than I expected, and I told her so. The conversation turned to her mother, Barbara, who lived in Florida and called Grace 3 times a day. Barbara, the successful real estate agent. Barbara with the vacation home in Sarasota. Barbara who'd apparently never made a mistake in her entire perfect life. I listened, nodding, because that's what you do. You let your daughter-in-law talk about her mother. You don't compete. You don't make it about you. But then Grace turned to me, and her voice changed. Got sharper. She put down her wine glass and she said it. You're not even half the woman my mother is. The room went silent. Michael's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Their daughter, Emma, just 2 years old, was banging her sippy cup on her high chair tray, oblivious. And I sat there, feeling like I'd been slapped. Like all the air had been sucked out of the room and replaced with something heavy and dark. I could have cried. Part of me wanted to. Could have stood up and left, driven the hour back to Queens in tears, called my sister and sobbed about how ungrateful and cruel this woman was. But something else happened instead. Something cold and clear settled over me like frost on a window. And I thought about everything I'd done for them. Everything Grace didn't know about. Everything I'd kept quiet about because I didn't want to be the kind of mother-in-law who reminded her children of every sacrifice. I pushed my chair back slowly, folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate with hands that were steadier than I felt. And I looked at Grace, really looked at her, and I said, then perhaps she'd like to take over your medical premiums. Grace blinked. Michael's fork clattered to his plate. Medical premiums? He said. What do you mean? And that's when I told them. For 3 years, 3 entire years, I'd been paying for Grace's health insurance. She'd lost her job at the marketing firm right before the wedding, and she'd been uninsured. Michael was between jobs himself, doing contract work that didn't include benefits. Grace had some pre-existing conditions, and the marketplace plans were expensive. She'd been panicking about coverage, and I'd overheard her crying on the phone to her mother one night when I was visiting. Barbara had apparently told her to figure it out, because she'd just invested in a new property and didn't have liquid cash. So I did what mothers do. I added her to my retiree plan through the hospital. $473 a month. Not a fortune, but not nothing either. Not on a hospital pension and Social Security. I'd cut back on other things. Stopped going to my book club because it met at a cafe and I couldn't afford the coffee anymore. Started buying generic everything. Let my own dental work wait because the copays were too high. And I never told them. Never said a word. Because Grace had been so stressed, and Michael had been so worried about her, and I thought that's what family did. You help. Quietly. Without making people feel small or indebted. If you've ever sacrificed something for someone who didn't appreciate it, hit that subscribe button. Because you'll understand where this story goes. And check the description box below, there are more stories like this one, stories about the invisible work women do and what happens when someone finally says enough. Michael's face had gone white. Mom, you've been, for 3 years? Grace was staring at me like I'd sprouted a second head. That's not. I thought Michael was. Michael wasn't, I said quietly. I was. Every month. Since 2 weeks before your wedding. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. Emma had stopped banging her cup. Even the house seemed to be holding its breath. And I stood there, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, exactly. Not even satisfaction. Just a kind of clear, cold certainty that I was done being invisible. Grace's mouth opened and closed. Michael looked between us, confusion and something else. Maybe the beginning of understanding, dawning on his face. And I picked up my purse, kissed Emma on the head, and walked toward the door. I didn't storm out. Didn't slam anything. Just left, quiet as I'd been for 3 years of insurance payments, and swallowed pride. The drive back to Queens that night felt endless. I kept replaying Grace's words. You're not even half the woman my mother is. While I'd been paying her medical bills. While I'd been skipping my own doctor's appointments to afford hers. While I'd been eating pasta 3 nights a week so she could see specialists. When I got home, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table and pulled out my bank statements. Started really looking at them for the first time in months. And that's when I saw it. The insurance premiums, yes. But other charges too. Medical bills I didn't recognize. Claims that had been denied and sent to me as the responsible party. Hundreds of dollars, sometimes thousands, for services I'd never received. My hands started shaking as I logged into my insurance portal. Pages and pages of claims. Specialists. Prescriptions. Physical therapy. Psychiatric care. Fertility treatments. Grace had been using my insurance for everything, and when it didn't cover the full amount, the bills came to me. Over 3 years, I'd paid nearly $17,000 in premiums. And another $8,000 in out-of-pocket costs. $25,000. That was a quarter of my retirement savings. That was why I'd been taking the bus for the past year after my car died. Why I'd been eating less. Why my own health had declined. And Grace had looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't half the woman her mother was. Something broke in me that night. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet crack, like ice on a pond at the end of winter. And I knew I wasn't going to let this go. Not this time. The next morning, I called my insurance company. Asked for copies of every enrollment document, every signature page, every form that showed how Grace had been added as my dependent. The representative said it would take a few days. I told her I'd wait. Then I called Patricia DeLuca, a lawyer who'd helped me with my husband's estate 20 years ago. She was semi-retired but agreed to see me. When I walked into her office with my folder of bank statements and a printout of insurance claims, she took one look at my face and poured us both coffee. Tell me everything, she said. So I did. The dinner. The comment. The 3 years of payments. The medical bills I didn't understand. She listened without interrupting, making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she sat back in her chair. Eleanor, this could be fraud. Insurance fraud, specifically. If Grace enrolled herself using false information, if she forged any documents. I don't know if she did, I interrupted. That's what I'm trying to find out. Well, let's find out together. 3 days later, the insurance documents arrived. Patricia and I went through them in her office, page by page. And there they were. Signature pages. Patient responsibility forms. HIPAA releases. All with my name signed on them. Except it wasn't my signature. I've been signing my name for 62 years. I know every loop, every angle. This was close. Whoever did it had been careful, but it wasn't mine. The E was slightly different. The way the L connected to the rest of the letters was off. And when I looked closer, I saw something else. Little circles dotting the I's in Walsh. A habit I'd noticed on Grace's shopping lists and birthday cards. Grace had forged my signature. Multiple times. On multiple documents. This is serious, Patricia said quietly. This isn't just using your insurance. This is identity theft. Forgery. You could press criminal charges. I sat there, staring at my own forged name, and felt sick. My daughter-in-law had been stealing from me for 3 years. Had looked me in the eye at family dinners, had let me babysit Emma, had accepted Christmas gifts and birthday cards, all while committing fraud. What happens if I file charges? I asked. She could go to jail. Definitely probation, restitution, a criminal record. It would affect her ability to get jobs, housing. And Michael. Michael would be devastated. Patricia nodded. Your family would never be the same. I thought about Emma. 2 years old, with her father's eyes and her mother's smile. Growing up visiting her mother in prison. Growing up knowing her grandmother had sent her mother there. But then I thought about Grace's words. About the disrespect. About 3 years of silent sacrifice while being treated like I was worthless. About all the other women who'd sat where I was sitting, who'd been used and dismissed and made to feel small. There has to be another way, I said. Something that holds her accountable but doesn't destroy everything. Patricia thought for a moment. You could confront her privately. Show her what you have. Give her a chance to make it right before involving the police. Sometimes the threat of exposure is enough. So that's what I did. I called Grace. Asked if we could meet for coffee, just the two of us. My voice was calm, friendly even. She hesitated but agreed. We met at a Starbucks halfway between Queens and Westchester. She looked nervous when she sat down, clutching her purse like a shield. I wanted to clear the air, I said, stirring sugar into coffee I wouldn't drink. About what happened at dinner. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. Eleanor, I'm so sorry. I was drunk. I didn't mean. Grace. I slid a paper across the table. One of the forged signature pages. This is my name. But it's not my signature. The color drained from her face. I have copies of everything, I continued quietly. 3 years of forged documents. 3 years of insurance fraud. $25,000 in premiums and medical bills that you made sure came to me instead of you. She started crying. Big, dramatic sobs. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was desperate. So you committed fraud. I didn't think of it like that. I thought you'd want to help, and I was going to tell you, but then time passed and it got harder. And you decided to keep using me while telling me I'm not half the woman your mother is. She flinched. I was drunk. I didn't mean it. Yes, you did. I leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell Michael everything. The truth. About the forgery, about the bills, about all of it. And you're going to pay me back. Every cent. $25,000. We don't have that kind of money. Then figure it out. Get a job. Sell something. Ask your perfect mother for help. I don't care. But you'll pay me back, or I'll go to the police with these documents. Her hands were shaking. Michael will leave me. Maybe. That's between you two. But if you don't tell him by Sunday, I will. I stood up, leaving my coffee untouched. You have until Sunday, Grace. If you've ever had to choose between being kind and being respected, drop a comment below. Tell me what you did. Because this was just the beginning of what I discovered. And make sure to check the description box. There are more stories like this waiting for you. Grace called me Saturday night. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying for days. I told him, she said. I told Michael everything. And he's furious. He didn't know about the signatures, about any of it. He thought you just added me to your insurance willingly. She took a shaky breath. Eleanor, there's something else. When I told him, he went through our financial records. And he found things I can't explain. Credit cards he didn't know about. Purchases I lied about. We're about $40,000 in debt he didn't know existed. $40,000. On top of the $25,000 she owed me. This woman had nearly destroyed my son financially while making me feel worthless. We're selling the house, she continued. We can't afford it anyway. And I got a job. I start Monday. We'll pay you back, Eleanor. I promise. It'll take time, but we'll do it. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. Michael called an hour later, crying, apologizing. My son, who I'd raised to be good and kind, shattered by the woman he'd chosen to love. I should have noticed, he kept saying. I should have protected you. You trusted your wife, I said quietly. That's not a crime. But it cost him. Cost all of us. And I sat there wondering if standing up for myself had been worth the price. The days that followed were strange. Michael moved out of the house he'd shared with Grace, stayed with a friend while they figured out what came next. Grace stayed in the Colonial with Emma, trying to manage a full-time job and motherhood while her marriage crumbled. And I went back to my apartment in Queens, feeling like I'd started an avalanche I couldn't stop. Patricia called 2 weeks after my confrontation with Grace. The insurance company flagged the account, she said. They're conducting their own investigation now. Once they confirm fraud, they're required to report it to law enforcement. Eleanor, this is out of your hands now. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means even if you don't press charges, the state might. Insurance fraud is a felony. They take it seriously. I thought about Emma. About Grace's promise to pay me back. About the fact that she'd already lost so much. Her marriage, her home, her sense of security. And now she might lose her freedom too. Can I testify on her behalf? Tell them she's making restitution. You can. But Eleanor, you need to think about what message that sends. To Grace, to your son, to your granddaughter. That you'll always protect them from consequences. I didn't have an answer. Grace was arrested 3 weeks later. Michael called me from the police station, his voice hollow. They're charging her with multiple counts. Forgery, insurance fraud, identity theft. Her bail is $25,000. The irony of that number wasn't lost on either of us. Are you going to post it? I asked. I don't have it. We're broke, Mom. The house is in pre-foreclosure. Everything fell apart so fast. I took a breath. I'll post it. What? No, you can't. Not for Grace. For Emma. She needs her mother. I paused. And because maybe this has gone far enough. I posted the bail the next day. Grace got out and immediately took a plea deal, probation, restitution, community service. No prison time, but a record. A permanent mark of what she'd done. But here's what nobody tells you about standing up for yourself. It doesn't feel the way you think it will. It doesn't heal the wounds or erase the betrayal. You just trade one kind of pain for another. Michael and Grace divorced 6 months later. He got primary custody of Emma, and Grace moved to a small apartment in White Plains. She worked full-time as a medical billing specialist and saw her daughter every other weekend. By all accounts, she was trying. Going to therapy. Making payments on what she owed me. Showing up for Emma with a consistency she'd never shown before. And me? I started a blog. Called it The Invisible Tax. About all the ways women, especially older women, are expected to give without acknowledgement. I wrote about my experience, but also about others. Women who'd raised their children's children. Women who'd paid for weddings and cars and tuition. Women who'd worked 3 jobs to keep families afloat and then got forgotten. It resonated. Within months, I had thousands of followers. People sharing their own stories of being taken for granted, of sacrificing in silence, of finally saying enough. A publisher reached out about turning it into a book. Michael remarried a year after the divorce. A woman named Beth who worked as a speech therapist and treated me with genuine warmth. They're expecting a baby now, a boy they're naming after my late husband. When Michael called to ask permission, I cried harder than I had through the entire ordeal with Grace. I see Grace once a year at Emma's birthday parties. We're civil. Polite. She brings cake and I bring cookies, and we both watch this little girl blow out candles and make wishes. Grace looks at me sometimes with something in her eyes, regret maybe, or just sadness, and I look back with something I can't quite name. Not forgiveness. Not hatred. Something in between. Emma is 5 now. Smart and funny and already reading above her grade level. When she stays with me on weekends, we bake and read and watch old movies. She doesn't ask many questions about why mommy and daddy don't live together. She just accepts it the way children accept the world they're given. But I wonder what she'll think someday, when she's older and understands what happened. Will she see me as the grandmother who stood up for herself? Or the one who tore her family apart? I got a letter from Grace 3 months ago. 6 pages, handwritten. She apologized again, explained about her therapy, about understanding why she'd done what she did. Childhood trauma. Her mother's conditional love. Anxiety about never being good enough. I saw you as weak because you were kind, she wrote. I know better now. I know you were the strongest woman in my life, and I destroyed that because I was too broken to see it. The letter sits in my nightstand drawer. I've read it a dozen times but haven't responded. Part of me wants to believe people can change, that relationships can heal. Another part knows some things break in ways that can't be fixed. Dr. Brennan, my therapist, says I don't have to decide. That I can let it be complicated. But I spent my whole life fixing things. And not having an answer feels like failure. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. Check the description box for more stories like this one. Because standing up for yourself is messy and complicated and doesn't come with a clear resolution. But sometimes, it's still worth it. It's been 2 years since that dinner. 2 years since I folded my napkin and said the words that changed everything. People still recognize me sometimes, from the blog, from the book I published last year. They stop me in grocery stores and tell me I was brave. That I inspired them. I smile and thank them. But late at night, alone in my apartment, I wonder if brave is the right word. Or if what I did was just anger dressed up as justice. Michael and Beth are happy. Their son Daniel is 6 months old now, all chubby cheeks and easy smiles. Emma adores her little brother, carries him around like a doll when they visit. And watching them, my son with his new family, building something healthy and whole, I know at least some good came from the wreckage. Grace is doing better too. She finished therapy, got promoted at work, paid back half of what she owes me. She's a good mother when she has Emma, by all accounts. Present. Attentive. Nothing like the woman who forged my signature and treated me like I was worthless. But here's the truth I'm still learning to live with. I won, and I lost. I got justice. Got my money back, or most of it. Got respect from strangers and acknowledgement that what happened to me was wrong. But I also got a fractured family. A granddaughter splitting holidays between 2 homes. A son who still sometimes looks at me with confusion, like he's not sure if I did the right thing. The blog helped other people. I know that. I get emails weekly from women who read my story and found the courage to speak up about their own situations. To set boundaries with family members who were using them. To demand respect instead of just hoping for it. That matters. It has to matter. Because if it doesn't, then all of this pain was for nothing. Last week, Michael brought Emma and Daniel over for Sunday dinner. We were sitting at my kitchen table, the same one where I discovered the fraud 2 years ago, when Emma asked if Grace could come to her 6th birthday party. Both houses, she said. You and Daddy and Beth and Mommy and Grandma Eleanor. Like a real family. The room went quiet. Michael looked at me, uncertain. Beth shifted Daniel on her hip. And I thought about that letter in my nightstand. About Grace's apology, her growth, her claim that she understood now what she'd done. I think that would be nice, I said finally. If everyone's comfortable with it. Michael nodded slowly. Yeah. Okay. We can do that. And just like that, something shifted. Not healing, exactly. Not forgiveness in the way movies portray it. Just acknowledgement that Emma deserved to have the people who loved her in the same room without tension crackling like static electricity. I haven't written back to Grace yet. But maybe at Emma's party, I'll find a moment to tell her I got her letter. That I appreciated her honesty. That I'm not ready for more than civil coexistence, but I'm willing to work toward that. Baby steps. That's what Dr. Brennan calls it. You don't have to forgive everything at once. Don't have to forget what happened. You just have to be willing to keep showing up, keep trying, keep believing that damaged things can still serve a purpose even if they're not what they used to be. The book I published, expanded from the blog, is doing well. Well enough that I could fix my apartment, buy a new car, take a vacation. But I haven't done any of those things. The money sits in savings, in investments, in Emma's college fund. Because I spent so many years being careful with money that I don't know how to be any other way. Beth says I should treat myself. Michael says I've earned it. But there's a part of me that's still that woman working double shifts at Presbyterian Hospital, stretching every dollar, believing my value comes from what I provide for others. Therapy helps. I'm learning that my needs matter too. That standing up for myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. That teaching Emma to watch me set boundaries is more valuable than teaching her to watch me absorb abuse silently. Here's what I want you to understand if you're watching this. If you've followed this whole story, standing up for yourself matters. Speaking your truth matters. Refusing to be invisible matters. But it's also complicated. It costs something. Sometimes it costs a lot. Grace will never be my friend. But she might someday be someone I can sit in the same room with at Emma's birthday party without my chest tightening. Someone I can acknowledge made terrible mistakes but fought to become better. That's not a fairy tale ending. It's not neat or satisfying or the kind of revenge story where everyone cheers and the villain gets exactly what they deserve. It's just real. Messy and complicated and ongoing. I'm 64 now. Still working through what happened, still figuring out who I am on the other side of it. Still learning to live with the fact that you can make the right choice and still lose things you wish you could keep. Emma asked me yesterday what being strong means. We were baking cookies when she looked up at me with those serious eyes and asked. Being strong means doing what's right even when it's hard, I told her. It means standing up for yourself. It means admitting when you're wrong. It means trying to be better tomorrow than you were today. She nodded, satisfied. Then asked if she could lick the spoon, and we were back to just being a grandmother and granddaughter on a Saturday afternoon. That's the real story, underneath all the drama and confrontation and legal consequences. The quiet moments. The cookies. The way Emma reaches for my hand when we cross the street. The way Michael calls every Sunday just to check in. The way Beth thanks me for babysitting and means it. The ordinary, precious work of loving each other despite our damage. Because of it, even. I don't regret what I did. But I don't pretend it didn't cost me anything either. Real life isn't a story where justice feels clean and everyone heals completely. It's more nuanced. More painful. More human. And maybe that's okay. Maybe it's enough to say I stood up for myself when it mattered. That I taught my granddaughter women don't have to accept mistreatment silently. That I helped other women find their voices through sharing my story. Maybe that's enough. Even with everything it cost. Even with the complicated, unfinished healing that's still happening. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your story, or just tell me you understand. Because that's what we need most, to know we're not alone in the complicated work of being human. And check the description box below for more stories like this one. Stories about women finding their voices. About families healing from betrayal. About the impossible choices we face and the imperfect ways we navigate them. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting my story matter. You matter too. Whatever you're facing, whatever choice stands in front of you, you matter. Your pain matters. Your boundaries matter. Your voice matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.